Today we're taking a journey to discover the history of iron mining in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. We'll also explore an old abandoned iron mine and some other remaining structures, including houses and a school. We'll visit the cemetery, where many miners who were killed in the mines are buried, and check out some memorials to the miners, including a historical marker and 2 murals painted on the sides of buildings in the town of Ironwood. There are 3 iron ranges in Michigan's Upper Peninsula: the Marquette Range, discovered in 1844, the Menominee Range, opened in the 1860s, and the Gogebic Range, discovered in the 1870s. Each range produced millions of tons of iron ore and shaped the towns that grew around them. Today we'll focus on the Gogebic Range, and in future videos we'll explore the Menominee and Marquette Ranges. Raphael Pompelli, a geology professor and mining engineer born into a wealthy family, became discouraged with academia and left Harvard University. In 1871, he secured investment money and traveled to the UP with the help of an Indian guide and woodsman. They traveled by canoe along the shore of Lake Superior to the Montreal River and camped in an area that would later be established as the town of Ironwood, still located in the western UP. He purchased options on land in the area, which would later become the site of the Newport Mine, named after his hometown. It would be several more years before mining would begin in the area. In 1881, Alexander Norrie, who came from a wealthy family, had an interest in mining and traveled from England to the Upper Peninsula, along with James R. Wood. Wood gained the nickname James Ironwood for his interest and success in iron mining. The two set up camp where the town of Ironwood was later established. As the two prospected in the area, Wood discovered iron near the camp, which led to the establishment of the Norrie Mine. Since Wood prospected for Norrie and Norrie had the investment money, the mine was named after Norrie. Soon more and more mines were discovered and communities sprang up. The Gogebic Range in the western UP became famous for some of the deepest and richest underground mines in the Midwest. Ironwood, named after James Wood, became one of the most important mining towns in the region, with rail lines carrying ore to the Lake Superior docks. As production increased, something extraordinary happened. The Gogebic Range drew men from across the world. Between the 1880s and the 1920s, tens of thousands immigrants poured into the western UP for mining work. Finns became the largest single group in Ironwood, escaping famine, political pressures, and Russian rule, and finding steady wages in the deep underground mines. Italians arrived in huge numbers to the Norrie, Newport, and Pabst mines. Poles, Slovenes, Croatians, Austrians, and Hungarians followed, forming entire neighborhoods near the mine sites. Smaller but significant groups of German, Irish, and Cornish added to the cultural mix. These men came because the Gogebic mines offered something rare in the old world, a job that paid enough to build a life. Mining companies sent recruiters overseas, posted advertisements in European newspapers, and worked with steamship lines to arrange travel. Many miners made the journey through chain migration. A brother or cousin would send word home, and soon an entire family or village would follow. By 1890, Ironwood was one of the most diverse and fastest-growing towns in Michigan. The men who came here carved out massive underground chambers, sank deep shafts, and worked in dangerous conditions: heat, water, falling rock, and long climbs up ladderways. Their labor made the Gogebic Range one of the richest iron-producing districts in the Midwest. But the Gogebic mines were considered the most dangerous in the world. Deep shafts and soft formations often resulted in fire, and wet conditions were factors in mining fatalities. It's estimated that 1,000 men or more died in the mines and 10,000 were severely injured. Hospitals were built near the mine locations to manage the injuries. The population of Ironwood peaked in 1925 at 12,000, making it the largest city in the UP, but World War I had taken its toll on men's lives in the UP. By 1923, the mines started to close. There was a decreased need for mining because the U.S. began to get its iron ore from overseas. By 1965, 45% of all iron in the U.S. was imported. The Gogebic Range produced around 325 million tons of iron ore from about 40 underground mines between the late 1870s and the mid-1960s. The Nori mine closed in 1935 after producing 56 million tons of iron ore, and one by one the other mines began to close. In 1937, some mines reopened because iron was needed for World War II related efforts, but that was short-lived. The Newport Mine closed after 77 years, having produced 37 tons of iron ore. The last mine to close was the Peterson Mine in 1966. The population in the area continued to decline as many people moved for employment. At the time of the 2020 census, the population of Ironwood had dropped to 5,045 and remains about at that level today. The Gogebic Iron Range in the UP stretches from the town of Ironwood to Bessemer and Wakefield, both smaller towns. Currently, most of the mines have been filled in and some turned into lakes. There are no preserved iron mines from the Gogebic Range. I traveled to several old mine locations and found a few of the sites are being used by logging companies. The logging industry has shaped the Upper Peninsula for more than 150 years. In the early days, massive white pine forests fueled booming sawmills and fast-growing towns. As the old growth disappeared, the industry shifted to hardwoods. Today, the UP's logging sector is smaller but still vital, supported by millions of acres of healthy, well-managed forest. In Gogebic County and the Ironwood area, logging grew right alongside mining. Early camps supplied mine timbers, railroad ties, and lumber for the new towns spreading across the Gogebic Range. Even with fewer mills and workers than in the past, the forest around Ironwood continued to support local jobs and tradition, keeping the region's long logging heritage alive. After a lot of searching, I finally found an old iron mine site with some mining buildings still standing. Today, we're exploring the site of one of the most important and least remembered iron mines of Michigan's Gogebic Range, the Newport Mine. Located on the north side of Ironwood, the Newport Mine was part of a chain of deep, powerful underground mines that helped make Ironwood one of the greatest iron-producing towns in the Midwest. The Newport Mine was opened in the early 1880s and became famous for its extreme depth. By the early 1900s, shafts had reached more than 3,000 feet underground, making it one of the deepest iron mines in Michigan at the time. Over 14 million tons of iron ore were removed during its lifetime. The Newport ranked among the top producing mines on the Gogebic Range. But the heart of Newport wasn't the machinery, it was the miners. The workforce reflected the waves of immigration that shaped Ironwood itself. Men arrived from Finland, Italy, Poland, Germany, Sweden, Austria, Hungary, and Slovenia. Most came with little money, often sponsored by relatives or labor agents. They lived in boarding houses near the mine, sent wages home, and hoped for a better future. At the peak of production, hundreds of men worked underground daily. By the 1930s, the richest ore bodies of the Gogebic Range were being depleted, and ore production shifted. The Newport Mine gradually reduced operations and closed in the early 1960s. Like many mines of the western UP, the Newport closed quietly. The shafts were capped, buildings demolished, and nature slowly reclaimed the land. Come along with me now as I walk through what's left of the Newport Mine site. When driving around the Newport Mine area, I was very excited to find a beautiful large old building still standing. I learned from the old sign out front that it's the old Bonnie School, erected in 1912. I had not realized that in the past there was a community called Bonnie around the Newport Mine. Within the mine, there was a mine shaft named the Bonnie Shaft. As the Newport Mine expanded, with over 1,100 men working at the mine by 1910, the mining company developed a cluster of homes, support buildings, and a school near the shaft. That cluster became known as the Bonnie community. The people typically lived in simple company houses, small wooden dwellings lined along dirt roads near the mine. Children from the community attended the Bonnie School, a one-room schoolhouse built around 1911 to 1912, just up the road from the mine. The Bonnie School was the social hub of the community. Holiday programs, gatherings, and school events tied the community together, especially during the 1920s and 30s. Newspaper references from the 1930s show Bonnie School listed among the district's most active, indicating a stable local population. The decline of Bonnie followed the decline of the Gogebic iron industry. The Newport Bonnie shaft operation slowed in the 1930s, and population began to thin as families left for work elsewhere. The Bonnie School closed around 1938 due to dwindling enrollment. By 1945, the schoolhouse was officially put up for sale by the Irwin Township Board of Education, but it never sold, and miraculously the beautiful building still stands today. After the mine closed, in the early 1960s, many housing was abandoned or removed. Without the mine, there was no economic base to support a community, and the Bonnie community soon faded. After doing some research on the Newport Mine, I found there is a historical marker on a hill overlooking the mine in a community called Jessieville, so I took a trip there. On the way, I was excited to see another old historical building and later found it was the old Jessieville Fire Station. Jesseville was a mining company community. Many homes, boarding houses, and small residences were clustered around the mine site to house workers and their families. This created a dense, vulnerable settlement, especially since many buildings were likely wooden or built quickly and often fire hazards. It's not surprising that the community built a dedicated fire station in Jesseville, rather than rely solely on a downtown station. Up here on Newport Hill, overlooking the old Newport Mine in the community of Jesseville, is a quiet but important historical marker. The spot, high above Ironwood, was once the gateway to one of the most productive iron mines on the entire Gogebic Range. In 1871, Harvard geologist Raphael Pumpelly climbed this very hill and noticed yellow iron staining on the rock. What he saw here changed the western Upper Peninsula forever. His discovery triggered a rush of mineral speculation, land purchases, and eventually the opening of the Newport Mine just below this ridge. The historical marker reads, "On this site, on October 8, 1871, geologist Raphael Pumpelly of Harvard University discovered one of the iron ore formations that created Gogebic County's boom era. The Newport Mine, named for Pumpelly's hometown in Rhode Island, began operations in 1884 and the Geneva Mine in 1887. By the closing of the mines in 1966, 255 million tons of iron had been shipped from Gogebic County." Next to the Newport Hill marker is a small, quiet memorial. It honors a miner named Edward Ryan, one of the many men who gave their lives working underground on the Gogebic Range. Like so many miners of his time, Ryan was an immigrant worker who came to the Gogebic Range in search of opportunity. Instead, he became one of the mine's many casualties, one name in a long list of men who never came home from their shift. The memorial plaque reads, "Edward Ryan Jr., son of Mr. and Mrs. Edward J. Ryan, was killed in this Newport mine shaft at this site November 8, 1918. He was employed underground. This young man, the oldest son in this family, was 19 years and 2 months old at the time of the mine accident. Edward Ryan Jr. was buried on the first Armistice Day, November 11, 1918. Another discovery was the remains of another mining building near the Newport historical marker. When the Newport Mining Company was in full operation, this structure served as the main office building. Inside, the superintendent, engineers, and clerks handled the business of a major iron mine, schedules, payroll, production reports, and correspondence for hundreds of miners going underground every day. Miners walked or rode up from their neighborhood to collect pay, settle disputes, or speak with the bosses. This office connected the everyday lives of immigrant families directly to the huge industrial system beneath their feet. As the decades passed and the mine began to slow down, the surface buildings were slowly shut down or repurposed, and this building was used as a doctor's office for several years after the mine closed, but is now vacant. Further on down the road, I made another discovery, an old mining building that was once the Newport Mine machine shop and blacksmith shop. While the hoist houses and shafts tend to get all the attention, the machine shop was the beating heart of the surface operations. Every drill, mine car, pump, cable, and locomotive that broke underground eventually ended up right here. Inside this building once held the heavy tools of the trade: lathes, drill presses, forges, anvils, and welding benches. The men who worked here weren't miners. They were mechanics, machinists, and blacksmiths who kept the mine's equipment running day after day. If it couldn't be repaired in this shop, it meant delays, lost production, and miners waiting for work and pay. I drove around the community longer and saw some very old and interesting homes that looked like they could have been around during mining days. On some back roads, I found another old mine building. This one was on the property of an auto salvage. I also found some old abandoned homes in that area that were likely mining related. Now I'm headed to the Riverside Cemetery in Ironwood, where many miners and their families are buried. Riverside Cemetery was established in the late 1880s, right as Ironwood was booming with the opening of the Newport Mine. Families were pouring into the Gogebic Range from all over Europe, and Ironwood's population exploded almost overnight. By the 1890s, Ironwood was over 80% immigrant, and nearly all the men worked in the mines. The cemetery grew into the final resting place for miners, their families, and their descendants. People who came here chasing work, chasing opportunity, or simply trying to survive. The gravestones at Riverside tell the story of Ironwood's immigrant past. Most of the men who came here worked in dangerous underground mines, and many brought their families after they found steady work. Others came alone, married here, and built lives in brand new communities tied to their home countries. Riverside is a huge cemetery, and currently there are close to 17,000 graves here. At first glance, one thing stands out immediately. So many of the names here are Finnish, Italian, Polish, Slovenian, German, and Croatian. This isn't an accident. It's a story of immigration, mining, hardship, and hope. One surprising thing about Riverside is how the cemetery naturally formed ethnic sections, a pattern you will still see today. Back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, churches bought land in blocks. Finnish Lutheran congregations, Italian Catholic groups, Polish parishes, and German Lutheran churches often purchased multiple lots at once. When a church or fraternal society bought a large block, their members were buried together, row after row, family after family. Burial societies shaped the layout. Mutual aid and cultural societies like the Finnish temperance halls, Italian fraternal aid groups, and Polish rosary societies offered burial plots as part of their membership. This meant entire sections of the cemetery were filled with people from the same country, the same church, or the same village back in Europe. Families wanted to be buried near their own community. For new immigrants who barely spoke English, this cemetery was a familiar place. They wanted the comfort of being surrounded by people who shared their language, culture, and faith. As you walk Riverside, the patterns are still visible. Long stretches of Finnish surnames, clusters of Italian families grouped tightly together, Polish and Slovenian rows near their church communities, German families interspersed in their own blocks. It's a map of Ironwood's immigrant neighborhoods recreated in stone. Now let's visit some of the grave sites of the men killed in the mines on the Gogebic Range. This is the grave of Julian Baumgart. No age is given, but the information on graves.com is that Julian was married about 1899 and had 2 children with one surviving. He was a miner and was killed in the Newport Mine. He lived about 3 hours. This is the grave of Private Frank Rains from Belgium. He was tall, of medium build, had gray eyes and light brown hair. He died at the age of 30 in 1919 when ore from the Nori mine caved in on him. This is the grave of Frank Belzowitz. He was born in Poland and died in 1916 at the age of 32. He was married. Frank's neck was dislocated when he was caught by a falling timber while working in the B shaft of the Nori mine. Finally, we have the grave of Medard van der Drijs from Belgium. Medard was married and had 4 children. He was a miner. He was killed accidentally in the number 4 shaft of the Aurora mine at age 32. Other graves I was not able to find include John Blomström from Sweden. He was married and had 5 children with 4 surviving. John was a miner. He was killed at the age of 37 when he fell down a ladder in the Newport Mine. Victor Rantala from Finland died at age 28. He was married and had 3 children. Victor was killed in the Newport Mine. William Thomas Hakala died in the Newport Mine at age 29. He was killed when he fell down a shaft. John Jazak from Poland, age 27, was single and a miner at the Newport Mine. He was killed in a mine accident when he fell to the concrete floor of the miner's boiler house. His brother Mike died in a mining accident 7 years later. Finally, let's take a look at two beautiful murals painted on the sides of buildings in Ironwood, Michigan, a UP town built on the sweat and sacrifice of thousands of underground miners. Today, two powerful murals stand in the heart of downtown, not just as artwork, but as memorials to the immigrant men who carved the Gogebic Range out of wilderness and paid for it with their lives. The Miners' Memorial Mural, the first of Ironwood's two massive mining tributes, completed in 2012 by artists Kelly Meredith and Sue Martison. It features more than 100 real Gogebic Range miners, each one painted from historic photographs. Next to each face is a name and the mine where he worked. This mural is a public record in paint, a permanent reminder of men who rarely had their stories told. The mural honors every man who took the cage down, and especially those who never came back up. Families submitted beloved photographs to be included, transforming this entire wall into a visual cemetery of memory. A few blocks away stands Ironwood's second major mining mural, a sweeping landscape dedicated to the Pabst Mine and the broader Gogebic Iron Range, including the Newport Mine. This mural was completed in 2019 by local artist Dan Perotti. Dan painted over 100 miners into the scene, representing not just the Pabst Mine, but generations of workers from across the range. Each figure reflects a different era of mining, clothing, tools, and technology. Together they form a timeline of the hard rock traditions that shaped this region. This mural places the miners within their world, a world of hoisting towers, ore piles, boiler houses, and blackened earth. This is how Ironwood truly looked during the peak of mining, stripped of trees, covered of smoke, and always dominated by the mines. Along the base of the mural, families purchased dedication plaques to honor fathers, grandfathers, uncles, and loved ones who worked beneath the earth. Some were killed in cave-ins, some from falls or falling rock, and many from the simple day-to-day danger of hard labor. Bye for now, and thank you so much for watching, and please consider subscribing to my channel as I explore the UP and share my life in the Northwoods.